Hello, everybody. Welcome back, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. Before we even jump into that, can I show you something really quickly? Look at this adorable folder. This folder is so freaking cute, and you probably can't see on camera. I don't even know I'm telling you this, but I was just looking at it and appreciating it while I was fanning myself with it. This folder, my husband Adam brought home because our daughter Bella needed a new folder for school, but she's super picky, and he knows that she's super picky, so he brought home 6 different folders for her to choose from. And I have to be honest, before she even got home from school that day, I saw this folder sitting there, and I was like, yank, that's my folder now. Yanked off the counter, my folder now, because it is freaking adorable. And then I put all my notes, what I'm going to be working on, and then what I'm currently working on, just so I have an idea and some organization in this cute little mushroom folder. And it's the red is glittery. So I think this is the cutest folder ever to walk the face of the earth. So I wanted to show it to you, and let's not talk about how that was random. And I'm so sorry, but I don't have friends, and I wanted to share something I like with you. But today we are picking up with the third video, the third part, if you will, discussing the case of Lucy Letby, a nurse from the UK who's been charged with the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 10 more babies between 2015 and 2016. So in about roughly a year to 18 months. All the babies had been patients at the Countess of Chester Hospital in northwest England, either at the time of their birth or shortly after their birth, and Lucy has pleaded not guilty to all charges. The trial is still ongoing, but at this point we have discussed the specifics of baby A and baby B, a twin boy and twin girl, so they were twins with each other's twin, who the prosecution alleges were both attacked by Lucy Letby. Baby A, the boy didn't make it, but his sister, baby B, survived. We also talked about the deaths of baby C, D, E, and I, as well as the attempted murder of baby F, twin brother to baby E, as well as the attempted murders of baby G and baby H. And today we're talking about 3 more babies that are alleged victims of Lucy Letby. We're talking about baby J and babies L and M, who were twin brothers. We're also going to hear from a prominent physician at the hospital, Dr. Rav Jarayam, who's going to explain how and when he first began to suspect that the eager nurse working in the neonatal department was up to something maybe a little bit nefarious. And when he and others raised concerns, they were basically told, shh, don't make waves. Don't make any waves, which does add some weight to Lucy's claims, or her defense's claims, that the hospital was negligent in a way and maybe a little bit responsible for what happened to these babies. Because even if Lucy was responsible for attacking the babies, if the hospital was informed that there was a potential issue with one of their nurses and they pretty much said, shh, let this go, leave it alone, they do have some blood on their hands. They do have some things to answer for. But before we dive into today's video, let's have a word from the sponsor, Magellan TV. If you've been watching me for a while, then you'll know why I love the documentary streaming service Magellan TV. And since today we're still talking about Lucy Letby, a nurse accused of horrendous crimes against newborn babies, I thought it was a good time to pull out one of, in my opinion, my personal opinion, one of the best true crime series on Magellan TV. And they got a lot of great true crime series. You guys know I love murder maps, but today we're talking about nurses who kill. Yes, it is a series that goes over different nurses who have committed murder, because it's jarring for us. We expect nurses and caregivers to have our well-being as their highest priority, but what happens when one of them turns out to be a killer? So this series includes 10 episodes. They're easy watches, under an hour each, and they go over a different nurse and the crimes they committed, like Karen Pedley, who was given 14 life sentences in 2016, or Paul Novak, who was a New York paramedic charged with murdering his first wife, Catherine. You can watch Nurses Who Kill and so many other amazing documentary series and films like it on Magellan TV right now. All you have to do is click the link in the description box and start your 30-day free trial with no strings attached and no one's feelings getting hurt if you decide to not continue on with Magellan TV after your trial. But I find that to be highly unlikely because Magellan TV is pretty great. I like the fact that they have apps for all sorts of watching abilities. Like on my Roku I can watch on my phone, I can watch on my tablet. They add 15 to 20 hours of new content every week, so you're never going to run out of entertaining and educational things to watch and enjoy. And all of these new releases are organized conveniently for you in Magellan TV's new releases section. For instance, this week I started watching this series, Warrior Women, hosted by Lucy Lawless. Yes, Xenon Warrior Princess herself. It's so bizarre to see her again, like on my TV. And I've really been loving this series because it does bring these women to the forefront. Women like Joan of Arc, Grace O'Malley. There's even an episode on the real Mulan, and that's been my favorite thus far. So once again, if you want to check Magellan TV out for yourself, they have true crime documentaries, history, science, nature, travel, everything. You can head to the description box and click the link and start your 30-day free trial today. Thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring today's video and being an amazingly supportive sponsor of this channel. And let's dive in. We're going to open this up with count 13, where Lucy Letby is accused of the attempted murder of baby Jay on November 27th, 2015. Now, it's a very sad story, but the mother of baby Jay was initially pregnant with twins. She had a difficult pregnancy, and after an emergency operation, they don't say for what, but she had an emergency operation while she was pregnant, and she lost one of her babies. However, she did give birth to baby Jay, a little girl, at 32 weeks along on October 31st, 2015. So baby Jay was, a couple weeks premature, but nothing drastic. And at the time of her birth, baby Jay seemed healthy, and the medical staff wasn't concerned about her condition. But later, the newborn was noted to have produced some brown bile. And according to Healthline.com, bile can take on a brown appearance when it's tinged with blood, and this could be a sign of a digestive issue or like a blocked intestine. So baby Jay was taken by ambulance to Alder Hey Hospital because there was concern about her bowel, and at Alder Hey, baby Jay was diagnosed with NEC, and she underwent emergency surgery to remove a small portion of her bowel. And this all happened when she was just a day old. So it gives you like a very inside experience or look into how resilient these little babies actually are, right? Even being a newborn, even being, somewhat premature, this little tiny baby, just a day into the world, is able to undergo this very intense surgery that's confusing and scary and probably painful for her, and still, come out of that okay. It is crazy to think about what the human body can be put under, like what conditions the human body can be put under, and what kinds of things that happen to us that we can bounce back from. Like, it's actually insane to think about it. And I have another bizarre and terrifying story about Alder Hey, and if we have enough time at the end of this video, I'll tell you about it, this hospital, and like what they were doing, but it has to do with the unauthorized removal, retention, and disposal of human tissue, including children's organs. I mean, actually, it wasn't just Alder Hey. It was many NHS hospitals who were doing it. But during an investigation into Alder Hey, organs that had been collected during the 10-year period between 1986 and 1996 were found stored in over 2,000 pots. And these pots also contained body parts from around 850 infants. Now, this isn't one of those stories where I'd say, oh, don't worry, it sounds worse than it is, because it's pretty bad. It does not sound worse than it is. Actually, when you get into the details, it's worse than it sounds at first. So pretty bad. So hopefully we can touch on that later. If not, maybe I'll just make like a short little 20 or 30 minute video about it as a follow-up. But now we go back to baby Jay, who'd undergone surgery on her bowel when she was only 1 day old. And the goal with this surgery was to basically only remove the portion of the bowel that was necrotized. Because remember, we talked about in the other two videos that we've done on Lucy Letby, NEC, this necrotizing colitis thing. It's very common in newborns, premature babies, and but it can also be very dangerous. So like if it isn't addressed or treated right away, it can become very, very dangerous for a baby. And when they removed the necrotized portion of the bowel in baby Jay, this was a very small area, measuring just about 1 centimeter. But the newborn was also given 2 stomas. And stomas are basically openings in the abdomen that that essentially allow the baby to get rid of like waste, urine and stool and stuff like that without having to use their bowel. So it gives the bowel of the infant a break while it's healing, and it just lets the waste be rerouted to outside of the baby, like through their stomach. It's crazy. Once again, to think about this little tiny baby, and like I'm, almost 40, and I'm over here like, nope, just let me go. I do not want holes in my stomach. If I need to have this crazy surgery and then I have to have these holes, like just let me go. I don't want to do this. I'm terrified of needles and cutting, and that's why I'll never get plastic surgery, because I cannot even imagine. Oh, needles just freak me out. So to think that this little baby is going through all of this and then is still healthy enough after that to be returned to Countess of Chester Hospital on November 10th is crazy. Baby J was born at Countess of Chester Hospital. She had the brown bile. She's sent to Alder Hey for this emergency surgery. She's back at Countess by November 10th, and she was admitted into the neonatal unit by none other than Lucy Letby, who on that same day messaged a friend and coworker letting her know that at the hospital it was, quote, chaos here, end quote. Now, I assume she meant the neonatal department was chaos. Maybe not the whole hospital, the neonatal department itself. And she did mention getting into it with another coworker. And she said like the staff on schedule that day were pissing her off. So she's just full of complaints. 5 days later, on November 15th, Lucy messaged a colleague asking how often did the procedure for baby J's Broviac line need to be done? And the colleague responded weekly. So once again, there's not a lot of like medical details given because I don't have access to the whole trial. So I basically just have like the roundup or the summary of what the newspapers are printing, and sometimes they will do like a step-by-step, but they don't get into the details that I really love. So I have to look all of this stuff up for myself. And from what I could tell, the Broviac line is a relatively rare type of IV line that's inserted into the chest and then into a large vein that leads to the heart. And this allows for long-term access to blood to this baby or this patient. And the Broviac line dressing needs to be changed weekly or whenever it gets wet or dry. So apparently this is what Lucy was asking this colleague about. Now, the next day, the notes from doctors showed that baby J was doing well and she was progressing well once she was back at Countess of Chester. And then over the course of 4 weeks in November, she was really doing well. She was moved from being treated in room 1, which is the ICU, the highest level of care, to room 2, the HDU, until finally she was in room 4, which was basically just a standard nursery. And it's, for babies who didn't need that critical of care. On November 25th, Lucy was back at it again, being miserable and complaining about everything. But I find her specific complaint on this day to be ironic, considering she just reached out to a colleague for advice on how to perform a medical procedure not long before she's complaining about this. So on November 25th, Lucy messaged a friend of hers complaining that while she had been out that night drinking and salsa dancing with her friends, she'd received 3 missed calls from the hospital. And she said it was because no one working at the hospital at that time knew how to administer immunoglobulin, so they had to call her. And Lucy's friend is like, sympathizing or empathizing with her, and she's like, that's messed up. They shouldn't be calling off-duty staff to do this. Sorry you had to deal with it. And that's what I find ironic, right? Because Lucy's complaining about people calling her with questions when she's not working, but she just did that to another colleague 10 days prior when she needed to know how often to change baby J's Broviac line dressing. And it seems like even when Lucy's not at work and she's like supposedly doing something fun, like for herself, like salsa dancing, hanging out with friends, drinking, she's still thinking about work. Or she's thinking about how no one has acknowledged how important she is to the hospital, so she has to remind them that she is so smart, so capable, and everyone else is such a dumb oaf that even when she's not at the hospital, they still can't get by without her and they have to call her because if she's not there, everything falls apart, right? It's weird. It's a weird humble brag kind of thing, similar to a little anecdote we talked about in the last episode or the last part of this, where Lucy was letting her friend know that the mother of I think it was baby G, told Lucy, "I'm so glad that you're here caring for my baby again." And Lucy was like, "I don't know why she would say that. Maybe she's just happy to have a real nurse." But, that's what she said. I don't know why she said that. What do you think she meant? That I'm awesome? That I'm everyone's favorite nurse? So weird, so odd. I don't know why she said that. She's like dressing a flex up as a complaint, like it's a tale as old as time. And I find it to be so triggering for me and so grating on me because I know people like this and they are just the worst, the worst. The next day, on November 26th, a doctor's note in baby J's file that was made at 10 a.m. stated that baby J was pink, well perfused, which means a good circulation, and in no respiratory distress. Also, her abdomen was soft and her stoma looked healthy. Like there was no infection, no inflammation, no issues with it, because that can be an issue. I mean, when you have holes in your stomach, that's literally like responsible for getting waste out of your body. The risk of infection is always a concern. So at this time, Lucy was once again messaging her coworkers and friends, talking shit about the hospital that she worked at and the staff that surrounded her, who were all idiots and not qualified enough to even be in their positions or breathing the same air as her. I'm being a little dramatic and hyperbolic, but pretty much that's what she was basically saying without saying it, because she doesn't want to be outright bitchy, right? She doesn't want to be like, Darlene is a complete moron. Darlene doesn't know how to administer immunoglobulin. Like, she should go back to school, idiot. She doesn't want to like come right out and be blatantly shit talking because she's too passive aggressive for that. She wants to be just subtle enough about it where the people she's talking to are like, this feels kind of bitchy, but also maybe she's just concerned about the quality of care that the patients are receiving. And that's why she's constantly talking shit about everybody. It's a form of like gaslighting, I think, where it's like you don't want people to know that you're talking shit, but you still want to talk shit. And they're kind of on the like the fence about whether or not you are, so they can't like assume you are, accuse you of doing it, or like just stop talking to you because of it, because you might just be a good person who's speaking out for those without a voice. So that's what Lucy's doing. But before Lucy left her house to go to work that day, she and her coworker exchanged messages, and her friend asked Lucy if she was well rested for her night shift. And Lucy goes on to once again complain about how she'd been called 3 times the night before, and the staff should have asked someone else. And right before leaving for her night shift at the hospital, Lucy sent her friend a message that said, "Off to the madhouse," end quote. And this is a different friend than she was texting the day previously when she was complaining initially about being called by 3 different people from the hospital and asked a question about immunoglobulin and administering it. This is a different person. So she's got to make sure that more than one person in her life knows how necessary and completely irreplaceable she is at Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal ward. Now, according to the prosecution, these texts that were exchanged, because we don't have a complete breakdown of all of her texts, but these texts made it seem as if Lucy was not happy with working conditions at the hospital, and she complained about caring for lower needs babies who only needed help with like feeding support, like baby J, for instance, who had been doing very well. So this means like these are not babies who are on the verge of death, or babies who the doctors are worried about and telling the parents like, it's hit or miss, touch or go. We're going to do our best and hope that this baby improves. She wanted to be working with babies in the ICU and the HDU. She did not want to be working with babies in rooms 3 and 4, which were the basic nurseries, where the babies who were doing well and basically just needed help with feeding support, she didn't want to work with them. The prosecution claimed that it seemed as if caring for these babies wasn't sufficiently stimulating for Lucy. It wasn't challenging enough. She just didn't enjoy it. And it kind of was like beneath her, is how she made it seem in these texts. According to the prosecution, I have not seen an actual record or transcript of these texts. By November 27th, baby J was doing very well, and her mother was with her at the hospital a lot, even though the mother had already been discharged and been, sent back home. But baby J's mother wanted to be there to practice caring for her baby during the day and to also establish an evening routine in preparation for going home, because the hospital was planning to discharge baby J soon. Keep in mind, baby J was doing so well, even after having emergency surgery on her bowel when she was a day old, that they were planning to discharge her and send her home any day. And baby J's mother had actually been at the hospital overnight from November 25th to November 26th, and then she went home on November 26th in the morning, planning to return as usual by 8 a.m. on November 27th. And on the 26th, for the night shift, Lucy Letby was the assigned nurse for two babies in room 3, while baby J was in room 4 with another baby and a different assigned nurse, Nicole Dennison. Now, at the handoff time between the day and night nurses, baby J was with Melanie, I think her name was Melanie Robinson, for the day shift, and then got handed over to Nicole Dennison for the night shift. And at the notes that were made between nurses during that handoff period, baby J was noted as being well, and she appeared to be in no pain or discomfort. Now, although Lucy was not in the same room as baby J, nor was she baby J's assigned nurse, she co-signed for the baby's medication at 12:02 a.m. since Nurse Dennison was only a Band 4 nurse and not qualified to give IV medication. So this is also something that pops up a lot. Lucy is a Band 6 nurse, so she's very qualified. She can pretty much do anything that needs to be done. But Band 4 nurses, Band 5 nurses are not as qualified. And in this case, Nicole Dennison wasn't qualified or trained, I guess, to give IV medication. So she needed Lucy's help, and Lucy co-signed on the record. And this is, I think, often why we see Lucy sort of piggybacking onto another nurse's patient. Now, what does that mean, right? Does that mean that Lucy is innocent and she just happens to be like on the chart giving IV medication right before this child collapses, and it's just because she's doing her job and she's doing the right thing and helping out these less qualified nurses to administer IV medication? Or does it mean that Lucy is thinking, well, this isn't technically my patient, and since this nurse is a Band 4 nurse and needs my co-signing and my help anyways, I can do that. I can interfere with this baby's IV, this baby's medication, and if they get sick, the baby, then I'm not the assigned nurse, so well, who's going to come back to me? Who's going to put this back to me? Now, according to swipe data, Lucy left and re-entered the neonatal unit a few times that night. She entered at 1:57 a.m., 3:47 a.m., 4:29 a.m., and at 4:40 a.m. So Nurse Nicole Dennison made notes claiming that baby J, around 4:40 a.m., right when Lucy Letby entered that room, baby J became pale and had mottled skin. Nicole Dennison left the room for a few minutes, and when she returned, there was another nurse at baby J's cot helping the baby breathe. And around 5 a.m., baby J suffered another desaturation, which means blood oxygen going down, and the baby had to be moved to the high dependency unit in room 2, at which point the registrar on duty was called. But by the time they got to baby J's cot, the baby was already getting better, although it seemed she was still working hard to breathe, to get oxygen into her lungs and her blood. So baby J's mother had planned to come back into the hospital by 8 a.m. Remember, she went home to get some rest, but instead she received an urgent call around 7:10 a.m. informing her that her baby daughter had suddenly collapsed and she needed to get to the hospital as soon as possible. Now, keep in mind, remember, this is a completely healthy baby before. She did have surgery. She had some issues with her, intestines, but these are breathing issues she's having now. Completely healthy in the lungs and in the blood and all her levels completely fine before this moment, which was around 4:40 in the morning. So baby J's mother and father rushed to Countess of Chester Hospital, where they found medical staff working hard to resuscitate their baby girl, who they found to be floppy, pale in color, and unresponsive in her cot. And when they say floppy, they say this a lot as if it's a legit medical term. And once again, I don't know if it is in the UK. It feels kind of weird to say, but floppy, weak, not responsive, almost like unconscious, like there's no bones in her body. I'm doing this like I'm Gumby, or I'm like one of those things outside of like the cell phone store, the blowing guys when there's a promotion, but that's what I see, like limp. According to Dr. John Gibbs, baby Jay's alarm had gone off at 6:56 a.m. And remember, this is the alarm hooked up to the monitor that's measuring the baby's vital signs. And at that point, 2 nurses responded, Mary Griffith and Lucy Letby, at which point they found the baby very pale and very rigid. So at that point, the parents were called to inform them of their child's precarious condition. We know that they got the call around 7:10 a.m. They rushed to the hospital. But before they even got there, baby Jay collapsed again at 7:24 a.m., at which point medical staff resuscitated her and began administering medication, and that's when the baby's parents actually entered the neonatal ward. So around that 6 a.m. time, these nurses find the baby to be rigid, and then when the parents walk in, about an hour and a half later, the baby is floppy. So that's a progression of a condition. Dr. Gibbs told the parents that he had no idea what had caused baby Jay's collapse, saying there was no infection, and surprisingly, even though she was in a bad state, she'd recovered very quickly. Baby Jay's mother was completely in shock, as much as the doctors were, who were completely, confused about why this very healthy baby who'd been doing great and was about to be sent home had just collapsed and had such, a downfall in her health and her condition. So baby Jay's mother said, quote, "She was extremely well. She was coming home. We were preparing for her to come home," end quote. Later, John Gibbs would tell the court that the source of baby Jay's collapse had eluded him. He said she'd been doing very well for weeks leading up to November 27th, and the 2 desaturations, the low blood oxygen that she'd experienced around 5 a.m., were alarmingly low. Speaking of the collapse the baby had gone through, right before 7 a.m., Dr. Gibbs said the baby's heart rate fell, and her limbs were stiffly extended with both of her hands clenched. Remember, the nurses, Lucy Letby and the other nurse, said that they found the baby rigid. So Dr. Gibbs basically enforces this. He said that this baby was having a seizure, and the seizure lasted about 10 minutes, which Dr. Gibbs believed was a reasonably long seizure, especially for such a small baby, and especially because there was no indication of what had caused it. At 7:24 a.m., when baby Jay collapsed again, it was a similar episode, and Dr. Gibbs said, quote, "This episode was much shorter. She did display the stiffness of all her limbs and clenches of her hands, and on the second episode, her eyes deviated to the left. It stopped after 3 or 4 minutes," end quote. But this stood out because baby Jay had never had a seizure before, and she never did again. Another doctor, Stephen Breary, also said he couldn't figure out the reason for the seizures, but he knew that the most likely cause would be hypoxia, which basically means low levels of oxygen in your body, specifically your tissues. And this can cause symptoms like confusion, restlessness, trouble breathing, bluish skin. But Dr. Breary was curious, saying, quote, "There remains the question of why baby Jay was hypoxic when 2 or 3 weeks beforehand she'd been breathing normally in air, and there was no suggestion of infections. In fact, we stopped antibiotics 36 hours after starting them because there was no evidence of the infection in blood tests," end quote. Dr. Dewey Evans claimed he could not identify any natural cause for this to have happened in baby Jay, but it was his opinion that baby Jay had been deprived of oxygen somehow. Now, here's something interesting because I looked up the reasons someone might suffer from hypoxia, and there's a few reasons. It was kind of like tossed around in court, like, did this baby get smothered? Was the baby, like her face covered? Or, somebody blocked her ability to take in air. But it's important to know that air and blood flow are both important to having enough oxygen in your blood, which is why lung disease and heart disease both increase your risk of becoming hypoxic. It's not just like breathing in, it's also about the blood, hugely about the blood. Do you know what can cause the level of hypoxia that baby Jay and other babies like her were experiencing? Venous air embolisms. And once again, according to everything I could find on this subject, air embolisms in newborns are extremely rare, to the point where data about the incidence of it isn't even really available, and just a few cases have been documented in the English language, just a handful of cases, which, if you're asking me, that's a good thing, right? Because that means it's not super easy to do accidentally. This isn't something, because it can be very bad for you, right? Especially in a baby. If that happens, like, this can cause all sorts of issues. Brain damage, as we've seen with some cases in these babies. Death, as we've seen in some cases with these babies. Just, trauma in general when you're so little and you don't have the ability to really cope with that or understand it. I'm glad that it can't happen that easily accidentally, or else there'd be far more incidences of it on file. And I guess that also means there aren't that many people out there doing it on purpose. So that's great. That's great. But it does also mean that it's more than likely that if this happened to these babies, in this case at Countess of Chester Hospital, if they did indeed have air embolisms, they were most likely purposely done. That somebody purposely made sure these babies had air in their system where it shouldn't have been. So we have Lucy Letby entering the neonatal ward after her break, entering Baby J's room after her break at 3:47 a.m. And within the hour, Baby J collapsed for the first time. Not too suspicious. Could have been anything, right? But then we have Lucy co-signing for Baby J's medicine again, which was a 10% glucose infusion at 7:20 a.m. And 4 minutes later, Baby J is having another seizure. And during trial, the only thing the experts could come up with was airflow obstruction, possibly due to smothering, but maybe an air embolism. They don't really know. They can't tell. Like, the doctors know, hypothetically, what causes these seizures, but they don't know what caused the cause, if that makes sense. Or at least they can't, solidly prove it. So after Baby J's collapse, Lucy Letby left work around 8:55 a.m., and she messaged her coworker and friend, Jennifer Jones-Key, just before 10:30 a.m. saying, quote, "Wow, it turned manic." Left at 9:15, but others still there, end quote. It's like the weird subtle lie for me, right? It's the weird subtle lie. Swipe card records have Lucy leaving the hospital at 8:55, but she said she left at 9:15. Why? I don't know, because it just sounds better, I guess. That extra 20 minutes is the difference between zero and hero. I don't know why. Maybe she sat in her car in the parking lot looking longingly at the hospital and wondering if anybody was, missing her or needing her before she left. I don't know. But her friend, Jennifer Jones-Key, she responded that things were only going to get worse because they were going to continue being understaffed and people were going to keep calling in sick. Later, Lucy, who just cannot be out of the loop about what's happening at the hospital, she messaged another coworker and she was like, "Is it still crazy on the unit?" And they were like, "Yeah, we have, only 5 nurses on right now." And I just find it interesting. Like, I remember working a typical job, and maybe it's different with healthcare workers. You guys will have to let me know. But when I leave my job, I'm not calling anybody to see what's going on there. Nope. Absolutely not. I did my part while I was there, and that is all I can do. And I need to have a life myself, and I need to step away from this and disconnect myself. And I don't. And if she complains about people calling her and asking her questions, but she's always texting people who are on shift and asking what's going on. So she doesn't want to answer calls where she could help a patient, actually help a patient, right? She's got people, even if the staff are underqualified and even if they don't know how to do what she was saying they didn't know how to do, you telling them and walking them through it helps the patients, which is what you claim to care about. So you don't have time for those calls and you complain about those calls, yet randomly, constantly, every day, you're texting people who are at work when you're not at work and being like, "What's going on? Still understaffed? Is it still a madhouse there? Am I needed?" It's obvious what her motives are, in my opinion. It's not that she cares about the patients. It's that she cares that the patients and the staff all recognize her for the angel and the saint that she is. And if she's not there, they don't feel comfortable. And if she's not there, nobody else qualified is. That's really what her motive is. It's about building herself up for whatever reason. I don't know. But Lucy was back at the hospital on the night shift from November 27th to the 28th. And by the afternoon of the 28th, Baby J's health was back up and she was returning to full feeds. Nurse Mary Griffiths messaged Lucy, telling her that she had left work at 9:45 a.m. and she hoped that Lucy would have a better shift that night. Lucy responded by telling Mary it was busy. There were still only 5 nurses on, but Baby J had been quiet. Nothing was out of the ordinary. At 5:06 a.m. on the 28th, Lucy made notes that Baby J was presenting with shallow breaths at times, but the baby had been cuddling with her mother and father, and the parents seemed very happy that their baby was recovering, which means pretty much the parents were there the whole time, right? Watching, which makes sense because their baby just collapsed, had, seizures, very scary, so definitely they're going to want to be there as much as they possibly can. For the prosecution, Nick Johnson KC said, quote, "It is remarkable that on many occasions, when children who had suffered unexpected, spectacular, and life-threatening collapses were removed from Lucy Letby's orbit, they had exceptional recoveries," end quote. So basically he's saying when Lucy's the only one there and nobody's really watching her, these babies get sick. But when there's people around who are making sure Lucy's never alone with these babies or not doing more with these babies than she needs to be doing, miraculously, the babies just get healthier and healthier. Their health improves. So we're actually going to go back to baby J in later videos because this was one of the infants that Lucy's defense team really focused on, trying to show that this had more to do with hospital negligence than with whatever Lucy did. And I will admit that there are some babies in this case, out of all the charges, where I don't feel, at least from what I have gotten, at what I've seen, what I've read about this trial in this case, I don't feel they have as much evidence and as much correlation between Lucy and the baby's collapses. I think that it just happens to be like this is the same pattern. So even though we don't have as much to show that she did this, we think that she did this because we have enough to show that she did this, and they're very similar, and the timing was right, and she happened to be the one to be there, and she's co-signing for the medications. Baby J is one baby, and there's a couple of them in this case, where I'm like, okay, I can see how there'd be enough there for the defense to say, well, she didn't hurt baby J. But in all reality, like all the prosecution has to do is get the jury to find Lucy guilty of one of these murders, right? Just one of these murders. And she's still going to probably go away for life, the rest of her life, maybe, 20, 25 years at least. I think somebody was telling me life in the UK isn't really life. It's like 25 years, but that's what she'll get, which probably would have been the most she would have gotten anyways. So I do understand that, like, we want justice for all of these babies and we want them to all have their day in court, but all they have to do is have her found guilty on one of these cases. And these next two are definitely two babies, baby L and baby N, twin brothers, who I think there's plenty of proof that Lucy was involved with what happened to them. So baby L and baby M, they were twin brothers born on April 8th, 2016 via C-section. At birth, they weighed just 3 pounds each, but they looked good, they looked healthy, and honestly, the only concern about them was their low birth weight, which wasn't even that low for a premature baby. We've had other babies in this case who weighed far less. Now, both baby L and baby M cried at birth, which might not sound like a good thing, but it is actually a sign of health, a sign of healthy lungs, which is very important because, once again, in premature babies, the lungs are sometimes not fully developed, and this can be a big concern. And I read this cool, fun fact from a 2005 study that claimed the non-vocal elements of crying, for instance, like inhale and exhale patterns, grimacing, frowning, etc., those things develop in the womb, right? It's crazy because this study revealed that at 20 weeks gestation, a baby has all the motor skill coordination necessary for this non-vocal part of crying. So when babies are thrust into the world at delivery and they're exposed to a completely different environment and, this newly cold air because they've been so warm and cozy and cuddly inside their mom, but now they're like into the world and there's metal things grabbing at them and weird people with like masks and like head coverings pulling them out and it's freezing. This makes them cry usually right away, and that also helps to expel amniotic fluid and mucus from their lungs, which, that's also helpful. So in a healthy baby, you want to hear a good, strong cry. Now, both twin boys also scored 10 out of 10 on their APGAR tests, 10 minutes after birth, which is normally when the APGAR tests are administered, and this is actually quite significant because Lucy Letby's defense team would say that she was not responsible for making any of these babies ill. They said, listen, like these babies are premature. They're born with health complications. And Countess of Chester Hospital, they weren't equipped or qualified to handle the, unique and elevated needs for these premature babies and their health issues. But these two baby boys, although premature, were very healthy at birth. 10 out of 10 on their APGAR test showed they were pretty much above average healthy. The APGAR test is a way for doctors to evaluate the health of a newborn, including the baby's breathing effort, heart rate, muscle tone, reflexes, skin color, and the average healthy newborn rates somewhere around 8 or 9 usually, but these boys had a perfect 10 score. The prosecution in this trial alleges that Lucy Letby attacked both baby L and baby M. They say that she poisoned baby L with insulin and injected air into the bloodstream of baby M. These babies were born on April 8th, and whoever attacked them wasted no time because by the late afternoon of April 9th, both boys' health had begun to deteriorate at almost the exact same time. So let's start with baby L. Baby L was admitted to the neonatal unit at 10:30 a.m. on April 8th, shortly after he was born. Lucy Letby was working the day shift, and she'd started her shift around 7:30 that morning. Now, the prosecution claims that by this time, April of 2016, Lucy had been switched to days instead of nights because the doctors and the consultants had started to notice a pattern in these infants collapsing, and this pattern showed a connection between Lucy and the babies who had suddenly fallen ill during the night. So it was Lucy Letby who took observations for baby L just before 11 a.m. on April 8th. And at this time, she noted that he had low blood sugar. And so the baby was treated with a 10% dextrose infusion along with some of his mother's expressed breast milk. For anyone who doesn't know, blood glucose is a sugar that moves through the bloodstream and provides energy to all the cells in a baby. It's the main source of fuel for the body and for the brain, and it's one of the most important sources of energy for a baby. So if a baby has low glucose or low blood sugar, and this condition lasts for an extended period of time, even hours, they may be at risk for some long-term developmental or learning issues. And I'm not just telling you this stuff because I'm going off on one of my fun fact tangents. This is important. Hypoglycemia happens when blood sugar is too low, and hyperglycemia happens when blood sugar is too high. When baby L's blood sugar was taken at 10:50 a.m. on April 8th by Lucy Letby, it was 1.9, and newborn babies should be treated for low blood sugar or hypoglycemia when a single blood glucose test is less than 2.6 in the first 72 hours of life. After that first 72 hours or 3 days, doctors and nurses would like to see the baby have a blood sugar level of 3.3 or above. But low blood sugar at birth is pretty common and easily treated, like very common and very easily treated. What would you give a baby to treat low blood sugar? Well, firstly, you'd want to make sure they were getting as many feedings with their mother's milk or formula as possible, right? And you'd also add to that oral or IV glucose. In this case, Countess of Chester Hospital used dextrose, which is fine because it's chemically identical to glucose. Now, what would you definitely not want to give a baby who had hypoglycemia or low blood sugar? At the top of that list, number 1 would be insulin. Insulin is the last thing you'd want to give somebody who has hypoglycemia. You might want to give insulin to somebody who had hyperglycemia, blood sugar that's too high, but insulin is an essential hormone that our bodies produce, which helps us turn food into energy and also lowers blood sugar levels. As I said, it is naturally occurring in the body, but if your body doesn't make enough insulin for whatever reason, you can use synthetic or human-made insulin. But since insulin lowers blood sugar, once again, the absolute last thing you would want to give to a newborn who was struggling with low blood sugar, right? Crazy that you wouldn't want to do that, and yet crazy that this baby ended up having a lot of insulin in his system. So the dextrose, the sugar basically that Lucy had given baby L, it seemed to have been working at first because by noon his blood sugar had raised to 2.5, which is pretty good for less than 24 hours after birth, especially if you started off with low blood sugar. And the blood sugar levels kept improving, rising to 5.8 by 4 p.m. But strangely, just 2 hours later, baby L's blood sugar was down again to 3.3, which was still not alarmingly low. So nothing really changed, and the course of his treatment continued. Basically, just give him mother's breast milk, give him dextrose, right? It was dextrose that they used, just try to keep the sugars coming. Now, Lucy was at the hospital at this time, but she was busy texting her friends and family. She just moved into a new house, which was closer to the hospital, of course. She wants to be as close to the hospital as possible. If she could, she'd probably live in the hospital, like Callie from Grey's Anatomy did for the first couple of seasons that she was on the show. But yeah, she'd probably live in the hospital if she could. But it sounded like previously she was living in like doctor housing. Lucy Letby was living in, not Callie from Grey's Anatomy, Lucy Letby was living in like doctor housing where a bunch of like doctors and nurses lived, but then she got her own place closer to the hospital. And, she was texting her friend and her coworker at 6:15 p.m. The coworker asked Lucy, how are you liking the new place? And Lucy responded, quote, unpacking, stuff everywhere, may do an extra shift this weekend, end quote. Lucy also texted her mother saying, much of the same, that she thought she was going to pick up an extra shift the next day, which was Saturday, April 9th. Another friend, her name was Sophie, she sent Lucy a message asking her how the house was, and Lucy responded saying, hey, it feels a bit weird having a whole house, but it's good, thanks, although stuff is everywhere as moved in properly on Tuesday and was at work Wednesday, Thursday, and today. And then she put in a monkey emoji after this message, the see no evil monkey emoji, with the hands over the eyes, which is not emoji to use. But let's examine this quickly because Lucy's kind of making it seem like she works so much. She works too much to even unpack her stuff after moving into a new house. But we also know that she texted her mother telling her mother that she was going to pick up an extra shift that next day. So if she was working a lot, it seemed as if it was by her own design, like this was what she wanted. And people she worked with said, yeah, Lucy's always picking up shifts, man. She always is the first one that people will call because they know she'll always take it. So Lucy's friend Sophie responded to this saying, quote, it'll feel more homey once you've sorted everything out, end quote. And then Sophie asked, how is work going? Sophie should know better than to ask that question to Lucy Letby. But Lucy responded, quote, unit is busy, no one particularly unwell, just volume and a few people off sick, end quote. No one particularly unwell. Don't sound so disappointed, Lucy. By 10 p.m. that night, baby Elle's blood sugar had dropped to 2.2. But after treatment, it was back up to 3.6 by the midnight reading. Nurse Tracy Jones, who worked the night shift from April 8th to April 9th, said that she'd noticed the cannella, I hope I'm saying that right, but this cannella, which remember is like an IV, and with the babies, I think they put it in like their belly button, like their umbilical cord region. But this nurse noticed that the IV had been knocked out of the baby at some point, so she reinserted it. Now, this may have explained why the baby's blood sugar fell, because he may not have been receiving the dextrose, and why it wasn't back up at the time that this IV was readjusted and reinserted. On April 9th, which was that shift that Lucy picked up, she was assigned to 2 babies, and nurse Mary Griffith was assigned to baby L and baby M in the same room. Baby L's blood sugar reading pre-feed before he ate, which was at 10 a.m., was 1.9, and hospital notes showed that Mary Griffith commented on the baby's IV dextrose infusion being increased. I think they increased it from 10% to 15%. At 10:34 a.m., Lucy messaged a friend of hers, Alyssa Simpson, not Ashley Simpson, which is what I thought every time I read her name, but Alyssa Simpson was apparently spending the day at the Grand National. And the Grand National is a big horse race, which is held annually every April in Liverpool, England. It's also broadcasted live on television, and it's considered to be the most watched horse race on the planet. So it's kind of a big deal, especially in that area, and people really would get excited about it. They'd bet money on the horses, etc. So it looked like Alyssa was going to be spending the day there, and Lucy wished her friend luck. She said good luck picking the horses, and she hoped that Alyssa's feet didn't get too sore, most likely from standing all day. At 11 a.m., baby Elle's blood sugar was 1.6, so it's still dropping. And at noon, pre-feed, it was still 1.6. So Lucy Letby, around noon, co-signed for a dextrose infusion bag for the baby. So a TPN bag, remember we talked about these bags before. They're bespoke, made specifically for the baby's needs. They have to be ordered from the pharmacy. Then they get delivered to the neonatal ward, and then the nurses will hook up the bag to the IV that's already inserted into the baby. So now this baby who's been struggling with low blood sugar has this dextrose infusion bag, and what you would normally want to see is like a rise in the blood sugar when you're putting sugar into the baby's system, but that didn't happen, right? And then about 20 minutes later at like 12:30, baby Elle's assigned nurse, Mary Griffiths, took her break. Now from 11:12 a.m. to 12:33 p.m., Lucy was actively communicating with a few different people via messaging. She sent her friend Alyssa another message saying, quote, "Hope you have a fab time. I'm in work doing an extra," end quote. How much do we hate? How much do we hate that? How much do we hate that friend or family member, the one like Lucy Letby? When you're finally able to take a day off and do something different and exciting and, you're like having fun and you let your friend know this and you expect them to be like happy for you, genuinely happy for you. And they kind of act like they are like, have a great time. I was so excited for you. But then they say something passive aggressive like, "Hope you have so much fun," while I'm stuck in this never-ending hellscape loop of being at work, picking up extra shifts, and never having time for myself. Have a fab time, girlfriend, right? Like, how much do we hate people like Lucy? Because Lucy has to let people know how hard she works. She has to let people know that she sacrifices her personal happiness in the service and care of others. She could be at the Grand National that day, but instead, she's choosing to devote her time to her patients who need her because everybody else who works there is a complete moron. Lucy also messaged her mother, Susan, and Lucy asked her mother, "Hey, is Dad," her father, John. Her parents' names are John and Susan, just so you know. But Lucy asked Susan, her mom, if her dad, John, was betting on horses for the Grand National. And she told her mother, like, if he is, could you have him put a bet on a gray horse for me? I don't know. She apparently likes gray horses. So Lucy's father actually came back and gave her the name of 3 different horses and then that were gray, I guess. And then he placed a bet, 2 pounds each way for his daughter on a gray horse named Rule the World. He said it was because the horse shared a name with a popular Take That song. Now, Lucy continued chatting with her peeps. She's even involved in a group chat with some friends and colleagues at the same time. And I guess they're setting up a time to come to her new house and like have a party. And she offered for a couple of them to crash at her place. And she was like, "Listen, anybody can crash at mine. I'm sorry I don't have beds or anything yet and nothing's unpacked, but you guys can still, crash there that night of the party if you wanted to." She said, quote, "Sorry guys, mad 4 busy days in work, but I got Magnum Prosecco and vodka. Whoop. No disco ball, but I'm sure we can manage," end quote. Now that I think about it, I don't know if vodka whoop is a type of vodka or if she meant vodka whoop, like got Magnum Prosecco and vodka whoop. I don't know. I should have looked that up, but I was too busy looking up all of these insane medical terms. At 2 p.m., baby Elle's blood sugar had dropped again to 2.0, and an hour later it had dropped further to 1.5. Lucy Letby once again co-signed for a dextrose infusion bag that was given to baby Elle at 3:35 p.m., but because his blood sugar was so low and there was no reason for it to be so low, and the normal procedures weren't getting it up and keeping it up, baby Elle's nurse took a blood sample at that time and she sent it out to the Royal Liverpool Hospital for analysis. It looks like this hospital is like a teaching hospital and they will do these like tests if you need them done. And I'm so glad, and I think it was Mary Griffiths, the nurse, even though she wasn't a band 6 nurse like Lucy, all qualified and all special, she had enough sense in her head to be like, this is weird. Let me see if I can find a reason. Because once again, this is not normal, okay? Normally, a baby has low blood sugar. You give them the glucose, the dextrose, the sugar, whatever, the formula, the breast milk, and the baby's blood sugar gets better. It doesn't like go up and down and up and down and up and down as if somebody's interfering with it. So I'm so glad that this nurse did that because when the results would come back later, they would show very high levels of insulin in baby Elle's blood. And not only that, low levels of C-peptide. So this is a very telling combination, high levels of insulin and low levels of C-peptide. The insulin level in this baby's blood was recorded as being 1099. The C-peptide level was 264. But the C-peptide level should be 5 to 10 times the level of insulin. So like higher than the level of insulin, much higher than the level of insulin, if I'm reading all of this medical stuff correctly. So that meant something was very wrong here. Now, C-peptide is a sign that your body is producing insulin. So a low level of C-peptide indicates that your pancreas is producing little or no insulin. This baby had a very low level of C-peptide, and the C-peptide test is typically done specifically to be able to tell the difference between insulin produced by your body and synthetic insulin that's injected into the body. So these results clearly show that baby L was not producing insulin, according to the C-peptide levels. Yet, the levels of insulin in his body were very high, incredibly high, which means he was being given insulin, like without a doubt, unobjectively or objectively, unsubjectively. I don't know. Either way, there's like no doubt that that's what was happening here. Now, as this blood sample from baby L was being taken by baby L's nurse, his twin brother, baby M, collapsed suddenly in his cot. And since baby L's nurse was busy taking the blood sample and tending to baby L, and baby M was also the assigned baby to that same nurse, obviously, somebody has to step in and help, so Lucy Letby rushed over to baby M to save the day and began performing rescue breaths. More medical staff responded and CPR began. Now, baby M had stopped breathing. His blood oxygen levels had dropped. His heart rate had dropped. He was basically in cardiac arrest. He was having a heart attack. And 6 doses of adrenaline were required before he stabilized. This took about 30 minutes. Now, at this time, the nurses and doctors involved with baby M's emergency resuscitation were scribbling a list of emergency drugs that had been given to the baby, the doses, like what time, who had ordered for the drug, things like that. And later in court, Nurse Mary Griffiths testified that this paper towel would have been, located on the crash cart or the resuscitation trolley, as they call it in the UK. And this paper towel with all this list of medications and stuff, it was a guide for everyone so that they would know or have a record of drugs that had been provided, what doses, when, things like that. Mary said she even recognized her own handwriting for 2 entries of adrenaline on the paper towel. And Lucy, who was also involved in trying to save baby M, it looked like she'd also written on that paper towel. But later, that list of medications and dates and times and names, that was found in a Morrison's shopping bag under the bed of Lucy Letby, along with a blood gas record for baby M. Now remember, I think we talked about this briefly in one of the 2 last episodes, but blood gas tests measure the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood as well as your blood's pH balance. So Lucy had these things like in a shopping bag under her bed for some odd reason. This was years later, by the way. So you can't just say like, oh, maybe she just threw it into that shopping bag, because some people are trying to defend her. Or not defend her, but say like, oh, it's not uncommon to accidentally bring home like a patient's like record, or to bring home like a part of it if it's just like stuffed in your pocket or something. Like, I completely get that, and I completely see how that would be normal to do. But what we have here is Lucy Letby doing this more than once and not throwing these things out, because you'd assume if you accidentally brought home a patient's record and you like found it stuffed in your pocket when you were doing your laundry, you'd be like, oh shit, I'm not supposed to have this. Let me just crumple it up or rip it up or shred it and throw it out, or bring it back to the hospital where it belongs, because maybe they need this stuff for their records. But that's not what she did. Instead, 2 years later, in 2018, when Lucy was arrested, the police found this under her bed in a shopping bag. So she's held on to it for a couple of years. That's strange, right? I don't think that's pretty normal. I can't say that many nurses out there would say, yeah, I just have like a memory box full of like patients' records that I keep for myself. Now, Nurse Mary Griffiths admitted she had never taken any of these kinds of records home with her, patient records, and she couldn't explain why Lucy would have done that and why she would have kept them for so long. And when Lucy was asked about why she had the records, she claimed, they weren't souvenirs. She said they weren't souvenirs, even though that's kind of what it seems like, a trophy in a way. Instead, she said she'd taken them home by accident. But once again, like, why keep them for 2 years if you've taken them home by accident? And it was also discovered that she had written in detail about baby M's collapse in her diary. So did you take the records home so you'd have something to refer to, so you could make sure you were accurate in explaining this baby's life-threatening heart attack to your diary? I don't know. It's just weird. Now back to baby L, baby M's brother. Even though baby L's dextrose was increased from 10% to 12.5%, his blood sugar reading at 5 p.m. was still very low, just 1.7. At 5:28 p.m., Lucy's mother messaged her, telling Lucy that her horse, Rule the World, had won. You're a winner. Yay. And at 6:01 p.m., Lucy messaged a friend back saying, quote, Haha, why not? The friend had asked something about like coming over and maybe helping her unpack, things like that. And then Lucy said, work has been shite, but I've just won 135 pounds on Grand National, end quote. In the group chat that Lucy was talking in during this time, Lucy responded to a bunch of her friends who'd suggested having an unpacking party, saying, quote, unpacking party sounds good to me with the flavored vodka, just won the Grand National, end quote. At 8 p.m., baby Elle's blood sugar level was 2.0, and it continued to go up, being 2.4 an hour later at 9 p.m. At 9:14 p.m., Lucy Letby noted that baby M, baby Elle's twin brother, was tensing his limbs, curling his fingers and toes, and rotating his hands and feet inward, and she knew that these symptoms were indicative of the baby's brain being starved of oxygen. But apparently she didn't think that it was important enough to, like, call anybody and, bring a doctor over to look at the baby because he was struggling with these kinds of symptoms, which is weird. And at 10 p.m., baby M's brother, baby L's blood sugar was 2.3. So it was going up, but then at midnight, it was back down to 2.1, and it stayed the same for the next reading, 2.1. And this next reading happened 2 hours later at 2 a.m. So more medication was given to baby L, but by 6 a.m., baby L's blood sugar was sitting stubbornly low at 2.2. So the glucose was increased again, but readings at 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. showed that his blood sugar was still 2.2. However, by 2 p.m. the next day, April 10th, baby L's blood sugar was 3.0, and a note from Nurse Laura Eagles, his day nurse, said that the baby was very unsettled at times, but his blood sugar was maintained and he could easily be comforted and settled, which is great. And ironically enough, when Lucy Letby was not there, the medical staff actually saw their course of treatment working for baby L. Baby L's blood sugar went up and it stayed up, which is what happens when you give a baby a sugar substance. That's what you should see, just in general, unless somebody's kind of like messing with it. Now, during the trial, they showed that Lucy had actually been asked to come in and work some overtime shifts on that Sunday night, Monday day, or Monday night, and Lucy had responded saying, no, sorry, I need some days off, like some day shifts off, but she said she could be on call for nights. Now, remember, by this time, she's been moved to day shifts because the hospital wanted to see if the pattern of babies collapsing would follow her there, which it did. And a lot of people I saw in like comments on Reddit and stuff were like, why were nurses asking her to come in and work night shifts when she wasn't supposed to be working nights? And that's simply because like hospital administration at the top level isn't going to tell all the nurses, like, we think your colleague is hurting babies, so we're doing this experiment, right? They're not going to tell them that. So the nurse who was asking her to pick up shifts, even if it was a senior nurse or a shift nurse, that nurse probably wasn't aware that Lucy was being suspected because they wanted to keep it on the down low. They didn't want to do anything to spook Lucy or have her change her MO so that they could continue tracking her. I believe that's what happened at least. So Lucy did not work at all on Sunday, April 10th, which happened to be the day that baby Al improved, where his blood sugar went up, stayed up, and he got so much better. But she did work the day shift on April 11th, which was a Monday, but luckily she was not in charge of baby Al or baby M, and she spent her shift once again complaining to her friends via messaging about how the neonatal unit was in a dire way and who's trained on the staff and who's not trained, who's good, who's bad. And she said something like, I got a bunch of people working here and some of them can do this and some of them can do this and they can't do this and they can't do this. And she said like it was a not good, mad, and poor skill mix. Basically, she's saying, like, these people aren't as good as me. They aren't as skilled as me. What is happening here? How are they even allowed to breathe the same air as me? Nobody should be given the title of nurse in the world except for me. Later, Lucy was asked by the police how baby Al had gotten the insulin. It was pretty much like a foregone conclusion at this point that baby Al had been administered insulin by somebody who was outside of his body. His body hadn't made the insulin that had caused those high levels. His body hadn't made the insulin that was causing his blood sugar to plummet in an unhealthy manner. And they knew that somebody had given it to him. And they asked Lucy, well, how do you think he got it? You're the one giving him his medicine. You're the one who would be administering it to him. And she responded that to her knowledge, neither she nor the other nurse who'd been the baby's assigned nurse had given the baby insulin because it hadn't been prescribed to him. She's basically saying like, I don't think that we did that because the only time we would ever give this baby insulin is if the baby had been prescribed insulin and he wasn't. Therefore, I don't think either of us did that. However, Lucy also admitted that it was a pretty impossible mistake to make, right? It's pretty impossible to accidentally administer that much insulin over that extended period of time. Accidentally. It has to be done purposely, especially since the insulin was kept in a locked room, in a locked cupboard. It wasn't just available to accidentally put in a TPN bag. It wasn't just like laying around and, you meant to grab salt, but you grabbed pepper instead, or you meant to grab salt, but you grabbed sugar, and now your scrambled eggs taste disgusting, stuff like that. It wasn't like an easy mistake to make. The insulin's kept locked up and it's like monitored as far as like the usage. Now, how is it monitored is a very good question that we're going to talk a little bit more about, and honestly, I would like some more information about. But the police asked Lucy, are you saying that this baby was given insulin intentionally? And she was like, not by me. I didn't give that baby insulin. I'm not saying it was done intentionally, but I'm saying pretty much impossible to do accidentally, but it wasn't me. Now, according to the hospital records, 3 vials of insulin had been issued to the neonatal unit of Countess of Chester Hospital in 2014. 2 vials had been issued in 2016, but there had been 6 vials issued in 2015. Now, 2015 is when the bulk of these collapses and these babies' deaths are happening. Yes, they're going into the beginning of 2016, but then you still have to look at the fact that whoever was doing this was probably still using insulin from that 6 vials. Why do you need 2 vials of insulin in 2014, 2 in 2016, and 6 in 2015? And what I want to know specifically is, how are these vials accounted for? Can the hospital show us throughout that time who needed insulin, who signed for insulin, what doses they used, and then show us if there was extra used that wasn't recorded? Are we able to, is there a camera in the room, a camera facing this very secured, locked cabinet to see who's, going in and taking insulin from a day-to-day perspective? And I don't know. There's no talk about cameras being in this hospital, but I have to believe there were. However, I wonder if they recorded over the footage after a week or a month or something like that, because Lucy wasn't arrested until 2018. So by the time she was arrested, it had been years, and maybe that footage was erased. Or maybe there's not cameras in there at all, but hopefully there are now, because that would really help figure out who grabbed insulin out of the insulin cabinet that day. But honestly, I don't even think anybody removed a vial of insulin from the cabinet, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. With this case, I have no doubt that Baby Al was poisoned with insulin. The arguments the doctors and the experts made about how the difference between naturally occurring insulin and synthetic insulin is clear and easy to see in lab tests is very convincing. But the question would be, was it Lucy who slipped this baby some insulin to keep his blood sugar low, to keep him sick? Was it Lucy who did it, or was it somebody else? We know somebody definitely did this. Was it Lucy? Now, when asked how the baby would have gotten the insulin, Lucy said it must have been in one of the TPN bags that the baby had received. But we already talked about that. We already talked about why they don't usually put insulin in these bags, because it's sticks to the sides and stuff. And obviously, there's no record of any insulin being put in the bag. And blood examinations showed that Baby Al's insulin level was at the very top of the scale that the equipment was capable of measuring. A crap ton of insulin had been given to him. Professor Hindmarsh, an expert in pediatric endocrinology at University College in London, he testified that these high readings could only be explained by someone giving insulin to the baby. And he said insulin can't be given orally, so it most likely was injected intravenously, probably being added to his TPN bags. More than one TPN bag. Professor Hindmarsh said, quote, "I have taken a conservative view of this, but I would suggest you could add somewhere in the region of 10 units of insulin to a bag. That would be sufficient to produce the hypoglycemic effect that was measured in the sample. Vials of insulin contain 100 units per milliliter. So the volumes we're talking about are quite small and not noticeable on a routine stock check. When added to infusion bags, you wouldn't notice a change in volume within the bag, and also insulin is a clear solution, end quote. Dr. Hinmarsh said this can happen very easily. It can just, somebody can have some insulin in like a vial, in a needle, what do they call them, syringe, and then just boop, pop it into the portal on the bottom of the TPN bag and shoot it in and then walk away. It takes 2 seconds like it never happened. And in Dr. Hinmarsh's opinion, to produce the glucose levels detected in this baby, around 3 or 4 bags could have been contaminated. So basically, in my opinion, Lucy could have snuck into the cabinet where the medicine was kept, and she didn't even have to remove a whole vial of insulin. All she had to do was maybe have like a syringe in her pocket of her scrubs, pull it out really quick. If there's a camera, her back's to the camera, so she's blocking it. She grabs the bottle of insulin or the vial of insulin, sticks in the syringe real quick, fills it up, puts the top on the syringe, puts it back in her scrubs, puts the bottle back in, and, grabs something else that she's there for. Maybe she's there for something legitimately, but she's stealing some insulin while she's there and using this other thing that she's there for legitimately as like a cover. So when she walks away, if there's a camera, it shows her holding the medication she's there for, and you don't see her just kind of steal some of this insulin, because you wouldn't need a ton to cause this effect in a tiny little 3-pound baby. According to this hospital, there are a set of keys that goes to this locked medication cabinet, but apparently the set of keys is passed around between nurses and doctors as needed. And once again, if Lucy was there at the medication cabinet for a legitimate reason, she'd have a legitimate reason to ask for the keys, and she'd have the opportunity to sneak out some insulin. And she could have just kept that same needle, capped, or that same syringe capped in her scrubs, and just kind of kept wandering back over to the TPN bag of the baby, pretending to look at something, pretending to look at the monitor or whatever, and just zoop, zoop, quickly, 2 seconds out. So let's go back to Baby Al's brother, Baby M, who had collapsed for no reason and had to be resuscitated. It seems like this baby was kind of the tipping point. This was when some of the doctors started to get suspicious of Lucy. Dr. Rav Jaram, who's actually a TV doctor in the UK, I guess, so he's like a famous kind of TV doctor, like Dr. Oz, but not like Dr. Oz though, right? Sorry, Dr. J. That's what I'm going to call him because he's Dr. J now. But anyways, he said that when Baby M got sick, it confused the hell out of him. He said, quote, "I couldn't really explain what had caused his collapse and why he suddenly got better," end quote. And you're going to see this constantly, right? We saw this already throughout these other babies. It's not uncommon to see newborn babies who are born with health issues fall ill, suddenly even sometimes. But for them to just get better so quickly, it doesn't seem like it was something inside of their body that was causing it, but rather something that was being done to them from outside of their body that was causing it. So while doing CPR on the baby, Dr. J, he said he noticed what looked like bright pink blotches on the baby's torso. He referred to them as flitting, meaning they'd appear and disappear. But once Baby M had recovered, those blotches had disappeared, and they were gone pretty much. Dr. J remembered, "I saw a similar skin modeling pattern on other infants that I had treated in the prior months at this hospital, specifically Baby A." Remember the little boy who died, Lucy's first victim, allegedly. So Lucy's attorney, Ben Myers KC, accused Dr. J of being fixated on Lucy since the death of Baby D in June of 2015. And Ben Myers said, "Isn't it true another doctor, Stephen Breary, had brought it to your attention that Lucy had been working with a lot of infants who had died or collapsed suddenly that month? All eyes were on Miss Letby then," Ben Myers said to Dr. J, to which Dr. J responded, "Clearly, yes. Duh, right?" Okay. Yes, Ben Myers, people were watching Lucy because she was suspicious. Dr. J said that he thought what had happened to Baby M could indicate an air embolism. It was the only thing he could think of when a previously healthy and stable baby suddenly collapsed and needed 6 doses of adrenaline to stabilize, right? That's the only thing he could figure out would have been causing that desperate and extreme of a condition. I'm going to come back to Dr. J in a minute, but when Dr. Dewey Evans took the stand, Lucy's attorney, Ben Myers, challenged him, saying Baby M's collapse could have been due to some underlying issues, right? Because Dr. Evans was claiming he believed without a doubt that whatever happened to baby M was a consequence of the baby receiving air intravenously. Dr. Evans told Ben Myers and the court that all other causes for baby M's collapse had been ruled out, and that accidental air injection is virtually unheard of since the advent of sophisticated and modern medical equipment. Dr. Sandy Bowen also testified that there were very few things which could have caused baby M to collapse, and it had been very unexpected. When asked if she thought that air had been administered to that baby with malevolent intent, she said yes, and that in her opinion, an air embolus fit with what the medical staff on the scene were observing. Okay, back to Dr. J and his moment of epiphany as he was treating baby M. His moment of thinking, is this deja vu? I feel like we've been here before. What is this skin modeling? What are these same symptoms happening in all these babies? This is crazy. So Dr. J explained during the trial that in June of 2016, after a large number of unusual, unexpected, and inexplicable events on the neonatal unit, the entire consultant body of the hospital sat down to discuss them. He recalled that an air embolus had been suggested as a potential cause. And so later at home, he was sitting there, he grabbed his iPad, and he started researching this air embolus theory. And he told the jury he vividly remembered the physical chill that went down his spine when he realized that this theory fit with what they had been seeing. And yes, all eyes did go to Lucy Letby, including Dr. J's, especially after what he witnessed with another baby, baby K. Now, they haven't covered baby K in detail in the trial yet. There have just been mentions of baby K. The baby was talked about during the opening statements and things like that. But I do have some information about the baby based on Dr. J's statement. And when baby K's time does come during the trial, I'll update you with more info. So baby K was born at Countess of Chester Hospital in February of 2016. She was premature, she had very low birth weight, and Dr. J actually helped to deliver her. So baby K, I believe, is only going to be at Countess of Chester Hospital for a few hours. She was scheduled to be transferred to Arrow Park Hospital, but for the time being, she was at Countess, and Lucy Letby was her assigned nurse. At 3:50 a.m., Dr. J was standing at the nurse's station, compiling his notes, and at that time, even though he didn't have a view of inside Nursery 1, where baby K was, he knew that the baby was in there with her assigned nurse, Lucy, and he knew that Lucy was the only person in the room with the baby at this time. That fact is also supported by swipe data, not just Dr. J's recollections. So Dr. J claimed he felt uncomfortable because he had started to notice Lucy's presence every time a baby collapsed, so he decided to go and check on Lucy and baby K. And as he walked in, he saw Lucy standing over the baby's incubator, which was fine for her to be standing there, but he could also see on the monitors that the baby's oxygen levels were falling. The strange thing was the alarm that's attached to the monitors that's supposed to go off when, the baby's vitals drop, the alarm wasn't going off. Someone appeared to have shut it off or paused it. And Lucy, who was standing right there, wasn't doing anything to fix, the issue with baby K's vitals. So Dr. J rushed over to baby K and saw that her chest was not moving up and down. She wasn't breathing. So he asked Lucy, what's going on? What happened here? What are you doing? And she responded that, the baby just started deteriorating this very moment. So Dr. J quickly located the problem. He said baby K's breathing tube had been dislodged. But he couldn't figure out how baby K's breathing tube had been dislodged, since this was not only a newborn infant, but she was very premature, and she had been sedated. So she was kind of just laying there limply, she wasn't moving her arms and legs around, to pull the tube out. She wasn't doing anything crazy that would have caused this tube to come out, even if she could, right? Even if she was a strong, full-term, 9-pound baby. It's still hard to believe that they could do that, but they can, right? But this baby specifically was small, not strong, and sedated, right? And not only that, the tube had been secured to the baby's headgear with tape. So you expect me to believe that Lucy Letby didn't do this, that the baby, who was sedated, pretty much unconscious, and, I don't know exactly what the birth weight was, but they keep saying that this baby was born so premature that she had to be transferred out right away, like within hours of her birth. And they had already scheduled that transfer to Arrow Park, which is a hospital that could handle a preemie of this type. So small that she pulled this tube out while she was like sedated and premature and sick, even though it was secured to her headgear with tape. Okay. Nick Johnson, KC for the prosecution, said, quote, Dr. J was troubled as the levels were falling and Nurse Letby had been the only person in the room. On these monitors, all readings are set to default values in the neonatal unit. Saturation levels falling to the 80s is a serious issue, and if the machine is working properly, it would have an alarm if the saturation levels fell, as Dr. J noticed them falling. There's an alarm pause button on the screen of the monitor. If you want to treat the child, but you don't want the alarm going away, it will pause for 1 minute. Bearing in mind the rate displayed on the monitor, Dr. J estimated the tube would have been dislodged between 30 and 60 seconds, and that is on the assumption that the alarm had only been paused once, end quote. So the allegation here is that Lucy Letby removed the breathing tube from this very premature baby who needed this oxygen badly, removed it, and then stood there for 30 to 60 seconds at the least and watched as the baby struggled for air and then stopped breathing. That is the allegation. And it sounds like they do have some pretty compelling evidence to say that she was probably responsible for this. Now, Lucy denies everything, literally everything. She said she didn't recall that there was a significant drop in baby K's saturation levels, and if there had been, the alarm would have sounded. She denied dislodging the tube and said she would have called for help herself if Dr. J hadn't shown up, but she was probably waiting to see if the baby self-corrected. This premature newborn baby who's in critical condition. She just wants to see if the baby can start breathing on her own again. Lucy said, quote, "We don't normally intervene straight away if they weren't dangerously low," end quote. What a bitch. What a bitch. Can you imagine having a baby lay there in front of you, a little tiny premature baby, the most vulnerable creature on earth, and say, this baby's not breathing, but I'm just going to give it a second. I'm going to give it a second or 2 or 3 or 60 and see if she self-corrects. Now, a nursing expert was asked if this was true. Would you just wait for a baby to self-correct and start breathing on her own again? And this nursing expert said, no, that is absolutely not true. A competent nurse would never have delayed intervention if there'd been a desaturation of any kind, especially in a baby as small and as premature as baby K. I bet that pissed Lucy off. I bet that pissed her off a lot to hear that when she said a competent nurse would never have delayed intervention. And Lucy's over here like, no one's more competent than me. How dare you? How dare you? She's probably super pissed at this nursing expert to hear that being said about her. Now, I don't have a ton more information about baby K, except that she did not make it. It was not long after that she passed away. And 2 years later, in April of 2018, Lucy looked up her parents on Facebook. Oh, and then Dr. J claimed that he and some other colleagues had raised concerns about Lucy by October of 2016. He said, quote, "We as a group of clinicians had already begun to raise concerns to members of the more senior management team in the hospital about the association that we'd seen with an individual being present in those situations and were, how do I say diplomatically, told that we really should not be saying such things and to not make a fuss. I didn't really have any hard evidence apart from the association we had seen. It is a matter of regret, and I wish I'd been more courageous at that time." End quote. I wish he hadn't put it diplomatically because I would like to know what the hospital administration said literally when a group of doctors who had recognized the pattern, who had all recognized the same pattern, went to them and said, "We're concerned that this one nurse is causing these babies to get sick and some of them to die, and we really think that there's something to this." What would the hospital administration respond to that, like directly? Don't make waves, don't make a big deal out of this, et cetera, et cetera. Why did they say that? Was that because they were already investigating? They were trying to keep it on the down low? Countess of Chester Hospital has some things to answer for. As Ricky Ricardo would say, they have some splaining to do because this is pretty ridiculous. Now, once again, I am trying to remain unbiased. I think that with some of these babies, from what I've seen, you could say we don't have a ton of hard evidence that Lucy did this. With some of these babies, I personally have no doubt that she was responsible, personally for me. But that still doesn't completely erase the responsibility of Countess of Chester Hospital. Were they understaffed? Were they staffing their neonatal unit with nurses who weren't qualified to do basic things that they need to do when babies are in, rough condition at birth? Were they aware that something was going on to cause the collapses and the deaths of so many babies, and they looked the other way because they didn't have time for it, or because maybe Lucy was a very qualified nurse and she was always the one to pick up shifts and she was dependable, and they were like, do we really want to piss her off? What if it's not her? What if she has nothing to do with it? Do we really want to piss her off and leave us more shorthanded and leave us more in the lurch without qualified nurses? They do have some things to answer for. And I hope that in this trial, Lucy's legal team, Ben Myers, makes them answer for that, because I'm not going to sit here and say when all of these babies, 17 in total, we have babies being attacked, some of them dying, some of them living but having, long-term damages. This baby here, baby M, who had to get 6 doses of adrenaline so that his heart would restart, do we think that that's gonna not cause any issues with his heart down the road, his little baby underdeveloped heart? His brother, baby L, who was basically given so much insulin that it's almost hard to comprehend how a little baby like that could have just gotten so much insulin. And having low blood sugar for an extended period of time can cause learning and developmental issues, which you won't even know about until years down the road. So even the babies that didn't pass away are still at risk for health complications and health issues in the future. And that's not fair. So am I going to just want to throw the book at Lucy and not look at the bigger environment that she worked in and look at a bigger problem? No, of course not. I want everybody who had any hand in this to be held responsible so that Lucy can go behind bars and not hurt anybody else, and the hospital can be held to account and be forced to enact measures that keep patients safe. Now, I do want to address something, because this is going to be probably a few weeks before we come back to Lucy Letby once I have more information from the trial that's ongoing, but I want to say something because a lot of you expressed concern and just personal fear after watching these videos. And, my daughter, Nev, who's 21 and who edits these videos, she also was feeling something similar. She was like, oh my God, it makes me scared to go into the hospital and give birth. Well, yes, I understand that. I understand those fears from all of you more than you know, because I am afraid of everything. I am afraid of everything because I know that out in that world there are bad people, and you sometimes, a lot of the time, can't tell by just looking at them. And if you trust them and if you let them in, they can hurt you. So I understand those fears, but I also want to say the majority of the medical professionals that I have met, paramedics, doctors, nurses, everybody really, the majority of them, and I would say 98%, have been amazing. And it does take a truly big heart and a truly kind soul to go into that type of work. You have to be a true caregiver at heart. So they've been awesome. Now, are there some that I've met that are assholes? Yes, that doesn't mean they're murderers, just means they're assholes who don't have great bedside manners, who I think weren't as qualified to be doing what they did as I would have liked them to be. Of course, we have a big teaching hospital in Rochester, and it just happens to be the hospital that I always end up at. It's a big teaching hospital that's connected to the University of Rochester, and it happens to be where I gave birth every time, all 3 of my children. And they will want, to bring interns in, they'll want to bring residents in, and they want these people to do things to you, because they have to learn somehow. And sometimes at these teaching hospitals, you can feel like a display. You're on display, everybody's watching you. And I remember I have horror stories about one nurse who gave me an epidural when I was pregnant with Aiden after I'd waited far too long to get it, because I wanted to do it without any drugs like I'd done with Nev, my first baby. Hi, Nev, you're my first baby. I had no drugs with her, and I was like, I could do that again. I'm not 17 anymore. I'm stronger and better. And I'm just weaker, I guess, because I needed an epidural with Aiden. He was also huge. He was 8 pounds and 12 ounces. But anyways, by the time I had asked for one, because I put it off for 16 hours, I was like, I can do this. By the time I asked for one, I was exhausted, weak. Nothing was going to happen. I was still in labor, and the anesthesiologist had gone home. So I had to take the person who was training to be an anesthesiologist. And she came into my room, and she had a mask on, and she's chewing gum behind her mask, like that. loud. And she had like a Pokemon on her belt. It was Bulbasaur. I still remember it to this day because it was like floating in front of me as she was completely butchering my spine. So I didn't want to judge her because she had a Pokemon on her belt, and I didn't want to judge her because she was chewing gum loudly behind her mask, but I did judge her when she continued to shove that needle into my spine and didn't, do it successfully. And then she kept yelling at me to stay still, and I was like, bitch, I know you're about 16 years old and you've never been pregnant, but I am currently pregnant. I'm currently in labor and I'm currently having contractions like every 3 seconds. So I would really like to see your dumb ass stay still during a contraction. You should be able to give an epidural during a contraction. You're doing it to pregnant women. Like that should be part of your training. But anyways, there's horror stories out there. But this woman, this girl, she was young. She wasn't trying to hurt me purposely. She wasn't trying to kill me. So even the people that aren't at the top of their game are still not nefarious. What my advice would be to you is if you're concerned, just remember that you can advocate for yourself and you should advocate for yourself. I can't stand entitlement of any kind. I hate it. It is my top one thing that I hate more than anything in this life. But do not consider yourself to be an entitled person when you go into a hospital or a medical setting and you advocate for yourself. That is the one time that you're not entitled. That's the one time where you are allowed to be as noisy and as bitchy as you want to be because it's your health or your child's health. So if you don't want your baby taken away and brought to the nursery as soon as the baby's born, and I'm not talking about a premature baby, I'm talking about a normal baby, they still try to take those babies away from you. They always try to take my kids away and bring it to the nursery. And I'm like, I just had this baby, man. You just pulled it out of me. I want to hold my child. It's been like a year of being pregnant and growing this baby inside of me and talking to it every night and loving it and wanting so bad to hold it in my arms. And now it's out and I can't hold it. And you're going to take it to the nursery where it's going to sleep at night? No, I want that baby in my room 24/7. I don't want to see you take this baby. If the baby needs to be changed, I'll do it. If the baby needs to be fed, I'll do it. When the baby is sleeping, she's still in here with me, period. That's it. And they did not like that. I don't know why the nurses at my hospital at least didn't like that. They wanted to keep taking my baby to the nursery. And they're like, you need sleep. And I'm like, I'm going to not have any sleep for the next 50 years. I'm going to get used to it now. Okay, we're fine. I want my baby with me. I made this. I want to see it now. I want to look at it when it's sleeping. So you can advocate for yourself. Even if you have an ICU or a NICU situation, you can advocate for yourself. I want to be nearby. I want to see my baby every hour to make sure that he or she is okay. I want to be hands-on and I want to be updated constantly. You can advocate for yourself. And they may not like it because they're busy and they don't want interfering parents popping in, but you can and you should. And if it makes you feel better and if it puts you at ease and lowers your anxiety, then do it. Make as much of a nuisance of yourself as you can because you're there for medical care. You're most likely paying an arm and a freaking leg for it, and you have the right to do and say what you feel is the best thing to do and say for yourself or your children's health, period. So don't be too stressed out about it because you're powerful. You have the power. And sometimes when you go into a medical field, you feel like you don't. You feel powerless because all of these people are there and they're the experts and they went to medical school and they know what they're talking about. And sometimes they can make you feel kind of stupid and they can make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about. And it doesn't matter if you do know what you're talking about because it's their job to make you understand what they're talking about in a way that can be translated in your brain and also put your fears at rest. It's their job to do that. So don't feel intimidated. Don't feel stupid. Don't feel small. Don't feel powerless. You are not stupid. You're not small. And you're very powerful. When it comes to yourself and your children and your health, that's where your power lies. So take it. Exercise it. Okay? And if you need help doing that, call me. Put me on FaceTime or whatever, and I'll handle it for you. All right? Believe me, those doctors and those nurses will not question you twice once I've spoken to them. All right? So that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for being here with me. I appreciate you guys. We have a bunch of videos coming out in March. I have a bunch of things I'm working on. It's kind of like a weird time in my head because I'm very like scattered and stressed for some reason, and it's just end of the month stuff. But we have a very interesting March coming up. Lots of great videos, lots of, I'm going to do a strange and unusual. It's been a while, but I have a good topic and I need a little break from this heaviness, as I'm sure you guys do too. So stay tuned for all of that. Don't forget to hit like if you like the video, share it if you think it's worth sharing, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Follow me on social media, Twitter and Instagram. Handles are in the description box, as are links to my podcast, Crime Weekly, that I co-host every week with retired police detective and Big Brother winner Derek Levasseur. And you can find the link to my coffee company, Criminal Coffee Company, in the description box. Best coffee ever. So good it's criminal. We love it. We got some great merch now. Go and check all of that out. Thank you guys so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you very, very soon.
Bottle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say I Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's killing you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood.